Have you ever questioned the nature of God? This inquiry is the crux of our exploration today. We're delving into a somewhat controversial perspective, questioning the widespread belief in a benevolent deity. We'll be discussing 10 distinct proofs that might suggest God's nature leans more towards sadism than love. From the sufferings in the world to the silence of God, we'll cover a broad spectrum of thought-provoking arguments. So buckle up and dive in as we explore the argument that God may not be a loving deity but instead a sadist. Consider the immense suffering in the world. Every day, countless innocent people face hardships and adversities that seem insurmountable. We see children in famine-stricken countries, victims of war and violence, people suffering from fatal diseases, and much more. The world is a stage of relentless suffering, pain, and hardship. Now, if God is love, as we are often told, why does he allow these sufferings to persist? Isn't love supposed to protect, to comfort, to heal? If God truly embodies love, wouldn't he want to alleviate the pain of his creations? Wouldn't he act to stop the injustices and needless suffering around us? The existence of suffering, then, seems to be in direct contradiction with the idea of a loving God. It paints a picture not of a benevolent deity, but of a being who watches passively as his creations endure pain and hardship. So, the existence of suffering questions the loving nature of God. Let's ponder over the widespread injustice. In a world where a benevolent God supposedly reigns, we find ourselves surrounded by rampant inequality and injustice. Innocent children starve while the guilty live in luxury. The righteous suffer, while the wicked prosper. If a loving God is at the helm, wouldn't justice be the norm rather than the exception? Consider the innocent lives lost in wars instigated by power-hungry leaders, or the countless people living in abject poverty while a small fraction hoards the world's wealth. Look at the systemic racism, sexism, and bigotry that pervade societies across the globe. We see injustice in every corner of our world, in every aspect of our lives. A God of love would surely intervene, wouldn't he? He would ensure that the scales of justice are evenly balanced. But instead, we see a world filled with senseless suffering and inequality. If God is love, why does he allow such injustice to persist? Think about the numerous natural disasters: earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, floods. These catastrophic events have claimed countless lives and caused unimaginable destruction throughout history. They are products of nature, yes, but if we accept the premise of a loving, omnipotent deity, we are compelled to question why such a deity would allow these disasters to occur. Consider the paradox. If God is truly loving, wouldn't he want to protect his creations from such devastation? If he's truly all-powerful, wouldn't he be able to prevent these disasters? Yet the disasters persist. Lives continue to be lost, homes continue to be destroyed, and people continue to suffer. This constant cycle of destruction and suffering, seemingly at the hands of an indifferent or even malevolent force, challenges the traditional belief in a loving God. It suggests a different narrative, one in which God is not the benevolent protector we've been led to believe. The occurrence of natural disasters questions the loving nature of God. Consider the varying conditions of life people are born into. On one hand, we have individuals born into wealth and prosperity, their futures seemingly laid out on a silver platter. On the other hand, we have those born into poverty, facing a life of struggle and hardship from the moment they draw their first breath. Why this disparity? If God truly embodies love, would it not be more fitting for all of his creations to be born into equal circumstances, to be granted equal opportunities from the get-go? But the reality is starkly different. From the moment of birth, some are blessed with more privileges than others. This isn't about the concept of free will or karma. It's about the fundamental conditions of life that one has no control over. The glaring disparity in life conditions questions the loving nature of God. If God is love, why is there such disparity? Think about the lack of universal salvation. Many religions around the world incorporate the concept of eternal damnation or punishment for those who do not conform to their specific teachings or doctrines. This presents a paradox. If God is a loving entity, wouldn't salvation be a universal gift, freely given to all regardless of their beliefs or actions? The idea of a loving God who allows the eternal suffering of some of his creations seems contradictory. It's like a parent who claims to love their children equally, but only provides for some while leaving the others to fend for themselves. This notion, when dissected, brings us to question the character of this divine being. Moreover, if God is love, why is salvation dependent on our actions or beliefs? Shouldn't love, especially divine love, be unconditional, transcending our human flaws and shortcomings? The lack of universal salvation questions the loving nature of God. Ponder over the many unanswered prayers. This is a phenomenon that has puzzled many, and perhaps you as well. If God is indeed love, why are there so many prayers that seem to fall on deaf ears? Consider this: a child prays for their sick parent to get better, a mother prays for enough food to feed her children, a soldier prays for peace. Yet, the parent's health worsens, the children go to bed hungry, and the war rages on. If God is love, wouldn't he want to answer these prayers? Shouldn't a loving God want to alleviate suffering, to bring comfort and peace? Yet, countless prayers are left unanswered every day. This phenomenon raises questions, probing the very nature of God's love. Is it not perplexing that a loving God would allow his children's pleas to go unanswered? This dissonance between expectation and reality sparks doubt, skepticism, and even disillusionment. Unanswered prayers question the loving nature of God. Think about the silence of God. It's a profound notion that has stirred philosophers and theologians alike. Picture yourself in a moment of crisis, your pleas for help echoing into the void. The silence that follows is deafening. If God is love, why does he remain silent? Why does he not intervene, not offer comfort or guidance when it's most needed? Consider the countless prayers that have gone unanswered, the desperate cries for help that have met with silence. This isn't about demanding miracles or expecting divine intervention at every turn. It's about seeking solace, reassurance, a sign that we're not alone in our struggles. The concept of a loving God is at odds with this silence. Love, after all, is not passive. It does not turn a deaf ear to suffering. It reaches out, it comforts, it responds. Yet, in our darkest moments, we often find ourselves met with silence. The silence of God questions his loving nature. Consider the association of fear with God. In many religious doctrines, the fear of God is a central tenet, a cornerstone of faith. This fear is not merely a respectful reverence, but often a trembling dread, an apprehension of divine wrath and eternal punishment. In Christianity, for instance, the fear of God is often touted as the beginning of wisdom. In Islam, the fear of Allah's wrath is a potent motivator for righteous behavior. If God is the embodiment of love, why then does fear play such a significant role in our relationship with him? Fear, as we understand it, is a response to perceived danger or threat. It is a survival mechanism, not a building block of a loving relationship. The very notion of fearing a loving God appears paradoxical. If God truly is love, should not his divine presence inspire feelings of comfort, peace, and safety rather than fear and trepidation? The association of fear with God questions his loving nature. Ponder over the mystery of evil. One might wonder, if God is all loving and omnipotent, why does evil persist? If God is love personified, shouldn't he be capable of eliminating evil entirely? Yet, we find ourselves in a world where evil is not just an abstract concept, but a tangible reality. A loving God, one might argue, would not allow the existence of evil. The pain, suffering, and injustice that is often attributed to evil are antithetical to the idea of an all-loving deity. Yet evil persists, and God, despite his supposed omnipotence, does not halt it. This is not to say that free will does not come into play. However, free will should not be an excuse for the persistence of evil. If God truly is love, he would ensure that his creations do not harm each other. The existence of evil questions the loving nature of God. Having explored these proofs, what do you think? We've journeyed through a landscape of suffering, injustice, natural disasters, varying life conditions, the lack of universal salvation, unanswered prayers, the silence of God, fear, and the mystery of evil. Each point invites us to question, to reflect, to challenge our assumptions about divinity. Are these proofs of a sadistic deity, or do they simply reveal the complexity of existence? Remember, the aim is not to dishearten but to encourage critical thinking and open dialogues.